The world didn't worship her because she was divine. It worshipped her because it had no other choice. Stop and think about something strange. In Elden Ring, grace guides you. Sights of grace resurrect you. The Erd tree glows above everything, and all of it flows from one figure. But here's the question nobody asks. Why her? Not who is she? Why does the world need her at all? Because here's what the game won't tell you directly. The lands between didn't choose worship. Worship chose them. It was the only thing standing between civilization and complete collapse. And once you see why the world needed this figure, you'll understand why it couldn't let her go, even when she tried to break free. The world did not begin by asking who should be worshipped. It began by asking how anything was supposed to last. Life surged, collided, devoured itself, and grew again. Empires rose without permission and fell without warning. Death was present, but it was not organized. Power existed everywhere, but meaning did not. Every culture clung to its own explanation, every people to its own ritual, and none of them reached far enough to bind the whole. This was not peace, it was motion, without direction. When a soldier died, there was no shared promise of return. When a kingdom collapsed, nothing remembered it. Time advanced, but it did not accumulate. The land carried scars, yet no single story explained why they were there. In that kind of world, belief is not comfort. Belief is architecture. A system was needed that could tell people where they belonged when they were alive, and what happened to them when they were gone. Something had to make death legible. Something had to make obedience feel permanent instead of arbitrary. Worship did not emerge because the world loved gods. It emerged because the world could not survive without order. That's the foundation. Without shared belief, power becomes exhausting. A world like that doesn't ask who deserves devotion. It asks what can hold us together. Worship is often framed as submission, but in practice, it is coordination. It tells millions of people to move in the same direction without needing to know one another. It establishes calendars, burial customs, hierarchies of authority. It answers questions before they can fracture a society. Without shared belief, power has to be enforced constantly. Every rule must be defended. Every death reopens the same argument. Violence never ends because nothing resolves it. In the lands between, this instability was not abstract. It was visible in the land itself. You've seen this. Ruins layered over older ruins. Cultures overwritten rather than replaced. Beliefs clashing without a final arbiter. No matter how strong a lord became, their influence ended at the edge of their territory. A universal system was the only alternative to endless collapse. For that system to function, it had to be more than law. Law can be disobeyed. It had to feel inevitable, natural, older than any single ruler. Worship provides that illusion. It convinces people that obedience is not submission to another human, but alignment with reality itself. Once belief takes hold, enforcement becomes secondary. People police themselves. They bury their dead correctly. They accept loss as part of a greater design. This is the real stake. Without worship, the world fragments. With it, the world endures, at a cost. Worship wasn't optional. It was the price of coherence. Before any single order could dominate, the lands between functioned like an unresolved argument. Power existed everywhere, but it was fragmented. Life was revered in its raw, overflowing form through the crucible. Horned bodies and tangled growth were not aberrations, they were proof of vitality. Elsewhere, ancient dragons imposed hierarchy through age and might. Fire giants guarded a different certainty entirely, one defined by survival against extinction. Deathbirds circled battlefields carrying a logic where death was not an ending, but a presence that demanded recognition. None of these systems were false. That was the problem. Each culture explained reality in a way that worked locally, but none of them could scale. Their truths overlapped, contradicted, and collided. Borders became fault lines. Faith hardened into identity. Identity turned into justification for conquest. The land still remembers this. You can see it in how ruins are stacked rather than cleared, temples repurposed instead of destroyed, new symbols carved directly over old ones. Nothing cleanly replaces what came before. It is all sediment. Without a center, time itself feels unstable here. History does not progress. It accumulates. Victories fail to settle anything because there is no shared framework to interpret them. This is what a world looks like when it has strength but no spine. Everything moves. Nothing aligns. And into that misalignment, something unprecedented will be introduced. Not another belief among many, but a structure meant to sit above them all. The world was drowning in competing truths. Something had to decide which one mattered. What finally changes the trajectory of the world is not conquest, nor revelation, nor even faith. It is standardization. A new order does not arrive as a story people tell one another. It arrives as a framework that makes every other story secondary. One set of rules governs life, death, inheritance, hierarchy. Not because it is truer, but because it is enforceable everywhere at once. This is the crucial shift. Order is no longer cultural. It becomes systemic. Death stops being a mystery negotiated by local custom and becomes a regulated outcome. Burial is no longer remembrance. It is processing. Life is not measured by impact or lineage, but by whether it fits the cycle correctly. Existence itself becomes legible. And because this order presents itself as natural law, it does not argue. It does not persuade. It simply functions. Trees grow where they are meant to grow. Grace flows where it is meant to flow. Those outside the system are not debated. They are categorized. This is why the new order spreads so efficiently. It does not demand belief at first. It rewards compliance. Align with it, and you are granted continuity. Resist it, and you are slowly erased from relevance. Importantly, no single figure needs to be named for this to work. The system is the authority. Individuals become symbols only after the structure is already in place. This is why worship becomes unavoidable. Not because people are commanded to kneel, but because the world is reorganized in such a way that kneeling feels like participation in reality itself. Once that happens, resistance stops looking like rebellion. It starts looking like heresy. The Golden Order didn't conquer through force. It conquered by making alternatives unthinkable. Worship does not begin at the altar. It begins at the grave. Once the new order settles in, death is no longer a rupture. It is a managed transition. Bodies are guided to specific routes. Remains are folded into a system that promises continuity rather than closure. Loss is softened, not by grief, but by procedure. You've walked through those catacombs. You've seen how uniform they are. That's not reverence. That's processing. This is where worship becomes infrastructure. People do not venerate because they are inspired. They venerate because the system touches every intimate moment of their lives. Birth, service, death, return. The order provides answers before questions can form. It tells you where to stand, where to kneel, and where you will eventually lie. And crucially, it makes this feel merciful. If death leads somewhere predictable, then obedience feels rational. If rebirth is possible, then sacrifice feels temporary. The system does not need to threaten. It offers reassurance instead, a quiet promise that nothing truly ends if you remain aligned. Over time, belief stops being explicit. It becomes muscle memory. People perform the rites because they have always worked. Doubt does not vanish, but it loses leverage. To question the order is not to seek truth. It is to risk becoming unprocessable. Those who fall outside the system do not just die differently. They are remembered differently, if at all. Their absence leaves no gap because the system was never built to account for them. This is the hidden function of worship. It does not elevate the divine. It stabilizes the world by deciding who counts. Once that decision is normalized, cruelty does not need to announce itself. It operates quietly, through omission. Worship didn't demand faith, it demanded participation. And participation became survival. Some things do not resist openly. They are removed quietly, so completely that later generations forget they were ever present. The new order does not conquer every culture through battle. In many cases, it simply refuses to account for them. Practices that cannot be integrated are not outlawed. They are made incompatible. Burial rites that do not align with the cycle stop leading anywhere. Bodies returned to the wrong soil do not come back. Ancestors cease to answer. This is how a people can vanish without a war. The Hornsent are the clearest example. Their bodies, marked by excess life, once reflected an older reverence for growth and multiplicity. Under the new system, those traits are no longer sacred. They are categorized as impurities, remnants of a time before regulation. Not enemies, errors. The land of shadow preserves this logic in negative space. It is not merely hidden, it is excluded, a place where the order's promises do not apply, and therefore where its subjects are not meant to look. What happens there is not debated or justified. It is simply placed beyond relevance. This is the quiet violence of a universal system. It does not need to destroy alternatives. It only needs to stop recognizing them. Over time, even memory bends. The absence feels natural. The erased stop being mourned because the world continues to function without them. Crops still grow. Grace still flows. The cycle continues. When a system works, people forgive what it costs. That forgiveness is not granted consciously. It is trained. And by the time anyone notices what has been lost, there is no longer a language to describe it. The cruelest erasure is the one you don't remember happened. For most of its history, the system does not require a face. It operates through symbols, procedures, and consequences. Grace moves, roots receive the dead, the cycle repeats. Authority feels distant enough to be unquestionable, close enough to be unavoidable. But eventually, a system like this demands embodiment. People want a center they can point to, a figure who can absorb devotion, blame, hope, and rage, without the structure itself being questioned. The order does not weaken when this happens. It becomes easier to maintain. This is where the name finally appears. Marika is not introduced as a conqueror or a prophet. She's presented as the vessel through which the order speaks. Eternal, remote, yet intimately involved in every rite that matters. Her divinity is framed as proof that the system is not temporary. If she endures, then the world she governs must also be meant to endure. Worship consolidates around her not because she asks for it, but because the order requires a singular anchor. Through her body, law becomes lineage. Through her image, obedience becomes personal. And yet, something subtle changes here. Once the system has a face, it also has a limit. The abstract becomes vulnerable. Every contradiction now has somewhere to land. Every failure, someone to blame. For the first time, the order can look back at itself. That is not a moment of collapse. It is a moment of pressure. And pressure, when sustained long enough, always finds a fault. The system needed her, but needing her made it fragile. Necessity is a heavier crown than divinity. Once the system depends on a single figure to hold it together, that figure stops being symbolic and starts being structural. If she falters, the order falters with her. If she doubts, doubt propagates outward through every ritual built in her image. This is the position she finds herself locked into. She is not merely worshipped, she is required. The dead rely on her permanence. The living rely on her continuity. Even rebellion depends on her, because there is nothing else left to rebel against. The world has narrowed its imagination down to a single axis, and that weight is unbearable. A system designed to erase contradiction cannot tolerate the inner life of the one who embodies it. Regret has nowhere to go. Mercy creates inconsistencies. Change threatens collapse. Every human impulse becomes a potential fracture in a structure that demands stasis. This is where the tension becomes irreversible. The order cannot evolve without undermining itself, and the one bound to uphold it cannot step away without destroying the only thing holding the world together. The tragedy is not that the system is cruel. It is that it works. It delivers stability. It delivers meaning. It delivers a future that looks like the past repeating cleanly. And as long as that future continues, no one wants to ask what it costs to maintain it. But systems like this do not break all at once. They crack at their center. When the one sustaining the order realizes that her existence is the final lock keeping the world from ever changing, necessity turns into imprisonment. And at that point, maintaining the system and destroying it become the same act. She wasn't a god. She was a keystone, and keystones can't walk away. The moment the system turns on itself, worship reveals what it has always been, not reverence, dependency. When the order fractures, it is not because faith weakens. Faith is still intact. People still kneel. The rites still function, at least at first. What breaks is the illusion that the system was neutral, inevitable, or self-sustaining. Everything depended on a single point of continuity. Once that point is compromised, the structure does not adapt. It panics. Grace fractures. Authority multiplies without legitimacy, meaning splinters into echoes of what it used to be. The same mechanisms that once unified the world now amplify its instability. This is why the collapse feels so violent and so personal. The world was not prepared to exist without worship because worship was never optional. It was the price of coherence. If this way of looking at the Golden Order speaks to you, you're already part of the conversation. Subscribing just makes it easier to continue. Remove it, and nothing knows where it belongs anymore. Here is the trap in its clearest form. A system built to eliminate chaos becomes incapable of surviving change. A world trained to obey cannot reorient itself when the object of obedience falters. What once felt like mercy is exposed as dependence. And yet even now, the system cannot be fully abandoned. Too much is built on top of it. Too many lives are structured around its promises. The ruins do not reject the order. They mourn it. This is the final consequence of necessary worship. It does not just shape belief. It shapes reality so completely that reality cannot imagine itself without it. That is not faith. That is captivity. The world worshipped her because it needed her, and that need became its prison. If the world once needed worship to survive, then the question is no longer whether that need was justified. The question is what happens after the need is gone. The lands between are filled with people still performing the motions of belief, long after the structure that gave those motions meaning has begun to fail. Shrines remain. Roots still receive the dead. Grace still flickers, but none of it answers the same way it used to. This is not a story about gods losing power. It is a story about systems outliving their purpose. Worship solved a real problem. It unified time. It organized death. It allowed history to move forward instead of collapsing into itself. But in doing so, it also narrowed the world's ability to imagine alternatives. Once everything was ordered, nothing else was allowed to be. What remains now is not chaos, but uncertainty. And uncertainty, unlike disorder, leaves room for choice. The world no longer asks to be held together at any cost. It asks whether being held together was worth what it erased. And that leaves only one question behind, waiting for whoever walks these lands next. When a world survives because of what it believes in, what is it allowed to become once it stops believing? She didn't fail the world. The world failed to imagine life without her. And that might be the real tragedy.